Welcome to the Simpleton Podcast, the podcast we know for a fact is listened to by the Vatican. We have an update on that today because the Vatican has taken action due to a previous podcast of the Simpleton Podcast. All right, what we're going to go through today is our first topic's kind of complex. We're going to talk about envy versus greed, how to grow in the opposite of envy, why fairness is from Satan, human development as a human good, and positive, negative, zero-sum games. All that's one topic. We're going to try to be disciplined and make it make sense. All right. The next topic, though, is what I just mentioned, that the Vatican has responded to the Simpleton Podcast where we asked them to shut down orders as opposed to reform them. We have an update on that, sent in by a listener, brought to our attention. Big news. And the final thing we're going to cover is the NNNWO. If you're not good with acronyms, it's the new world order that appears to be kind of the big news of the day. As part of the new world order, the new world order, my brother-in-law declared this week for running for president of Costa Rica. Laura
it's
nods
very
yes.
Exciting.
Well, Laura knew this
exciting.
before the podcast, so Laura's
I knew it. Well, yeah, I did.
Okay, so This was a kind of interesting, and he's run for office before, and he's married to my sister. But what made this make me think that I think he's going to win is the day after he declared, a group of comedians did a skit where they were making fun of my sister.
They roasted your sister.
And it was all in Spanish, and my family was sharing this video around of them kind of imitating my sister at his announcement for running for president. And Laura had to translate it for me. How did you summarize it?
I summarized it as your sister having a very thick accent when speaking Spanish. Then that sounded a little more like maybe Texan than I think your sister sounds. And it was basically I support my husband. I support him not only because he's my husband, but because he is nice and he has creative ideas for Costa Rica and he is trustworthy. So
this is what I've been thinking about now that you translated it, is my sister is above average intelligent, above average nice, above average considerate. Not saying she's the best in any of those categories, but she's above average on all those categories. But when she talks simply, even in English. I don't think this is she's bad at Spanish thing. If we did something or went to a play or whatever, she'd just be like, that was very good. And it'd be okay. I mean, I'm so used to it because I've lived with her my whole life. And I think they're kind of touching on that.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting, though. I was thinking about it because it's like a trustworthy politician with creative solutions for the place he's going to,
That's a very big claim.
That's a very big claim. And it sounded, when the comedians were roasting her, it sounded simplistic. But if Juan Carlos really is those things, that's fantastic.
Right.
Yeah.
So if Juan Carlos Hidalgo, 1 year from now, becomes president of Costa Rica, I think we're going to Costa Rica. I think my family is.
Oh, yeah, you gotta.
I think we gotta. I think all the Simpleton Podcasts should, actually. And I think if you're up for it, you can request a mail-in ballot for the Costa Rican election and help him win.
Clark, who?
Our listeners.
Illegally, fraudulently vote?
No, I'll just assume we have a big listening base in Costa Rica.
Okay. Oh,
all right.
Right. Okay.
Okay, let's go into our first topic. I almost feel the need to defend why I like this guy, but there's a very interesting guy. His name's Charlie Munger. He passed away this year in his 90s. He's the +1 of Warren Buffett. When Warren Buffett talks, there's always Charlie Munger beside them. They're lifelong business partners, both from Omaha and both extremely successful in what they do, which is investing, right? And Charlie Munger, but they also kind of go off investing all the time and give advice and things. And he was talking about, he said that when the 10 Commandments were written, they focused on envy and not greed. Mm-hmm. And that envy is actually far more dangerous than greed. And you know this from the 10 Commandments. And he goes on to kind of unpack that a little bit. but I want to read the 10th commandment real quick, because I think it's interesting the way it's phrased. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. And the way that what he's pointing out is it doesn't say you shouldn't want more or want any of those things. You just shouldn't want to take it from your neighbor. And what I found interesting about this is I found in my own life that the opposite of envy would be wanting your neighbor to thrive. Mm-hmm. You know, like wanting them to do good, rooting for them, almost like they're your favorite sports team, you know, or like when my friend does really well, I am happy for him, you know. And of course that sounds obvious. That sounds easy, but I think this is actually something that people struggle with far more than they even want to admit out loud. And like, an example is in my own life, like at Simple House and at, and like in my real estate work, I have to actually like sit down and deliberately think, I want what is really best for this person. And if it hurts me, if it's not good for me, like if I lose this missionary, or if I don't get a real estate deal because they find a better one that where I'm not in any part of the deal, I actually want them to get that, you know, and I want to celebrate with them when they get that, you know. And I find that if I put a little bit of conscious effort, my heart can do that. And I feel great. You know, but I also find that like a lot of us, I've seen people struggle, and I see the temptation of it. Like when something really great happens to people around you and not to you, it actually can be quite hard, you know, to be happy for them.
Yeah. I think this idea that it kind of requires this exercise to have the feeling, you know, I think there's a lot of envy that it can just kind of go under the radar maybe, and making yourself say out loud like, oh, I am so happy for that person, or even if thinking it, but like thinking it consciously, like I am happy that you know, I think we also find that like a necessary exercise in our house. It's a thing that requires like for you to consciously be checking, you know, and also it's kind of a simple solution in a way too.
Yeah, but it also questions like, why? What is it about us that this is difficult, right? Like, so if all your best friends, people you actually do care about, all receive an enormous blessing and you don't, do you feel left out? Do you feel like why are you troubled by it? You know, or why is there even like it seems a weird temptation, right? Like, would you be okay being poor if everyone was poor? You know? And there's also this weird kind of like observation that was made that like, if you're in the top 25% wealth-wise of your neighborhood, you tend to be happier than if you're in the bottom 25% wealth-wise of your neighborhood, even if your wealth is the same. So like, say you made like exactly $80,000 a year and you're in this neighborhood and you're at the top, or you're at this neighborhood and you're at the bottom, your happiness is less when you're actually in the better neighborhood. And just like, what if you were disabled and everyone around you was able-bodied? You know? Or you end up in a situation where you can't thrive in your career and other people who chose different tracks do, you know? It's just an interesting situation that I'm sure we all find ourselves in at some point somehow, you know?
I think there's even like smaller ways, you know, that come up in the workplace like that. Person that annoys you, you want them to be wrong about everything. And you begrudge them making a good point because they're the person that should be wrong and you're the person that should be right. Or, you know, maybe I revealed something about myself just now, but no, but I think there's just like a lot of little interactions. It's not just like your neighbor gets a boat and you don't have one or something. None of my neighbors have boats, but yeah.
And it's interesting that Christ, you know, tells us to pray for our enemies. And I'm almost like, yeah, and don't forget to pray for your friends.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So anyway, I think this all has to do with envy somehow. I do think there's also maybe a rational thing. Like, you don't want to be left out. You don't want to fall behind relatively. Like, what does that say that you need to reform in your life if you're not receiving these blessings? There's kind of some correct self-analysis if things aren't working out for you that you need to do, right? But you shouldn't be actually jealous or envious of your neighbor because of that. You need to like fix your own thing if there's something to fix. And sometimes there's not. Sometimes they're just fortunate.
Yeah. And I think it's like interesting if comparing envy with greed, it's like greed is just like you want more. But right. Like envy, there's like maybe a little bit of an impossible standard or a thing that you can never reach, like it's like I think if you're envious of your neighbor, there's just going to be a constantly moving goalpost. Like the neighbor gets the boat, then you get the boat, and then there's a new thing because it's not about the boat,
I don't find you're kind of making it a little bit impossible. Like there's a way in which greed's impossible because there's always more you could have. You know? But there's a way in which envy is not impossible because you can actually get to a dominant position sometimes compared to the people around you.
I guess so. Yeah.
Not in every way, right? But like you can kind of like surpass people, in so many ways. And then you're kind of like, are you getting like your jollies from or maybe that's the bad way of saying it, but are you is your pride edified because you've like surpassed your friend, Or is it just, what you really should do is just want the success for the sake of the success, not for the relativeness of it.
Yeah, I think it's like if you're always measuring by other, and maybe comparing envy and greed isn't that useful because they're both, they're both sins, but if you have like a goal in your life that you're getting after and maybe it's a luxury or whatever, but it's clear like this is what I want for myself or my family and you work for it and whatever, it's different than like if you're always, I think envy makes you always judge by what other people have or don't have. So it's just an ever shifting thing that is corroding all your relationships,
Right. Let's get back to this, though. So Charlie Munger was interested in this concept because he and Buffett and a person who made this really famous recently is his name's, I think, Pinker, and he's from Harvard. He's published a book. Yes, Steven Pinker. And he basically had this thesis, look at how much better everything is from 100 years ago. Healthcare, shelter, food, etc. Right? Even the amount of war we have is less than 100 years ago. Yet we have a very unsatisfied population that's poor. They don't sit around thinking how lucky they are that they're better off from 100 years ago. And I don't actually think the problem is envy there. I have a different read on this. I do think the politics surrounding it get obsessed with envy, but I actually don't think the problem is envy. And the thing that shed light on me,
like their misery is envy. Is that that is caused by
envy?
No,
I mean, like I think sometimes I think that's what's become clear to me is that when nonprofits and political movements mobilize people to like, for the sake of quote equality or fairness, they're often motivated more by envy than actually by helping the poor.
Yes. Yeah. I misspoke. I didn't. But you're saying that the suffering is not. I said is. I meant to say is not envy. Right.
I think they have a valid suffering.
Yeah.
And the suffering, as I see it, became clear to me. One of the things that made it clear to me was a little documentary I watched years ago. And it was by the Planet Money podcast, which is this NPR podcast. And the Planet Money podcast wanted to do like a real life, how do we actually interact with the economy? And they sell T-shirts. So what they did is they made a documentary about where their T-shirts come from. And they came from Bangladesh and Colombia. So they went to Colombia and found a woman who works in the T-shirt factory where they buy T-shirts. And they profiled her. And it was kind of like a nice profile. It was like she was a single mom. She had her own apartment. She also had family that helped her a little bit being a single mom. And she had dreams of one day designing her own designs, which were kind of like T-shirt designs and things like this. And you're like, this person is poorer than most of the American poor who lives in public housing. Like just number of dollars that flow through this household is less, right? This person also, though, has like a dream, has like an ambition, has like a way that they think they can develop as a person or economically or whatever, just as, they can make better and grow, And when you watched the Colombian woman, you didn't pity her. And the injustice of it was not like so obvious. It was just like, I'm rooting for you. Like you have a real life with real goals and real ambitions. And it looks like a life where you could grow, But then they went to Bangladesh and they found a woman who works at the t-shirt factory in Bangladesh. And she lives with her parents, and she has to give up most of her money to support the family. And she sits they don't have anything to sit on in their house. And the factory is very dangerous compared to the Colombian factory. And she's very trapped, And you're like, this really sucks. And it's not like Planet Money's fault or anything. There's like huge cultural problems here. There's economic problems here. But she doesn't have a way to, in a sense, be more, And we've quoted this far more than Pope Benedict ever wanted us to quote this. But in one of his encyclicals, he said that development is the primordial human vocation. Like the vocation before all vocations is just, he said, to be more, And that means spiritually, but does it also not mean materially? And I don't mean material like make a mountain of wealth. I mean just in the material world, this has to play out too, not just in the spiritual world, right? And I think that the working class in America and throughout Western Europe has been used to feeling that they had development. They had the ability to be more, and they haven't felt like that for a few decades, and there's a lot of upsetness.
And that they were building something for their children.
Right. Or even just their community, like that, you could be like when you're starting new bowling clubs and just doing things that just make life richer, or you're not, and you see life deteriorating successively, which could be due to weird technologies that aren't healthy for humans. It could be due to economic realities. It could be due to cultural problems or spiritual problems. I don't know. It's not easy to discern that, but they don't feel this like idea that they see opportunity to grow, And I think that that's where a lot of the upsetness of the poor and the frustrations of the poor and the working class are coming from that. They're not actually coming from subsistence problems. Like I'm starving to death over here, And I actually think that when charities pitch that as the reason to give money, particularly in America, I think that's quite dishonest and they're hurting us. How does this kind of play out, like when you start thinking about the social doctrine of the church and stuff, or like more than just helping Joe, but like bigger picture problems, like say Palestine and Israel, I think anybody who I think is going to make sense on this issue is going to actually want the good of Israelis and want the good of Palestinians. You're not going to want the good of one at the expense of the other, although one might have to sacrifice for the other, but you're actually going to want them both to thrive, right? And a lot of what we've done in America, when we talk about minorities and disadvantaged groups and blah, 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 we're kind of creating a situation where we're not acting like, how do we make policies so that this minority thrives or does better? We're actually more talking about how do we like play a zero-sum game? It's somehow like a premise in the whole conversation that there's only just this one pie of things that have to be distributed.
Yeah, I think I hear this type of talk frequently. It's like, the poor are poor because the rich who don't have to work for their money hoard all their money. Some version of that is the.
And it's not that that's not got truth in it.
Yeah, and some right, but I think it's like I'll see. I realize online comments are a self-selected group, but I'll you see a video, someone's doing well, and this person has obviously worked hard to get where they are or maintain maybe where their family left them or whatever, and there's a lot of there will be a lot of attacks, and I think like, no, you want this person in your town. Like you want this person in your city. You want,
meaning like a wealthy person. Like you're not trying to run them out.
You want thriving businesses in your.
Yes.
You want employers in your city. You want people that are good managers in your city.
Right.
And that's interesting. the instinct to want to shun that. And like you said, there are cases of people hoarding wealth that hurt other people. But I'm not talking about, I'm more the way people talk about it is bizarre.
The way any civilization or society flourishes is not by redistributing a set amount of resources, but it is by creating resources. And that's what a positive sum game is. It's when you actually start working together and creating value. So like an economist would be like, hey, here's 3 subsistence farmers. They have to raise all the grain, all the vegetables, and all the meat they're going to eat, right? And then if you just like allow trade, then like one would start specializing in veggies, one starts specializing in grain, one starts specializing in the meat, and they all get more grain, more meat, and more vegetables, because of the specialization. So you ended up in a positive sum, meaning like you actually grew the pie that you're distributing. Another way to tackle the problem is to be like, okay, this guy's not doing well on grain, we'll just take the grain from the other people. And now you're in a zero sum. Like there's only so much grain there. Now, the last type of game is negative sum, where you actually destroy things while redistributing. Yes. And that seems to be what happens to human societies on their way down. And if you're in like the podcastosphere, whatever you want to call the sphere of podcast world, a popular thing they're saying right now is a Moloch game, which is a biblical reference to Moloch in the Old Testament, who is kind of the god who forced the rulers to sacrifice their children on the walls of the city, right? And it's like the ruler saying, I care about this city so much I killed my own kid here. That's a negative sum game, right? And once your society starts playing these negative sum games, you're going to go downhill. And the more negative they are, the faster you go downhill. So I think what's happened is this desire for fairness and this envy keeps us from thinking in terms of the positive sum games, keeps us thinking in terms of like, how do we help all these people thrive, which should be always the first question, not the last question.
Right. So it's like in a town, it's like having a lot of strong businesses is good for everybody in the city,
Right.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, even like, my husband is also in real estate. Like, it's like having a good team is more valuable than being solo, even though you guys are going all after the same. Like he benefits from having a team, even though they're all, going for more clients. But there's a value in that.
Let me put forward a policy question, because I think this would kind of like pull out from people what the problem is, right? Say I had a new policy, and say the 3 richest Americans are probably like Musk, Bezos, and Gates or something, And I had a policy that would make the poorest Americans 2% richer and double the wealth of those 3 guys, And it hurts no one. Decreases wealth nowhere. Should you take that policy? I think everyone should say yes. But I think we would be hesitant to, because it's just so darn unfair sounding. But fairness is not in the Bible. There's no fairness. It's not only not in the Bible, it's not in nature. It's like a very important legal concept. But it's not really a concept that you can use to run your family or run your personal relationships or anything with, or friendships. It just doesn't work as a concept, And that's why but yet it keeps raising its head, like at different like planning meetings, even at simple house meetings, whatever. And it's like, I've just become more and more convinced that fairness is from Satan.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I think actually satisfies people is not the 2% wealth gain or the doubling of Bezos's wealth unsatisfying them. I think what satisfies people is that they believe that their hard work will be rewarded and that they will be better off and they can provide for their kids and help them be better off than they are. I think that's what really satisfies people. And then if they, like, I have no hope in my life of ever catching a billionaire, wealth-wise, and I don't even want to. It's not like even on my chart, It's not on my vision board that I keep over here, Laura. But
just zebras.
But I do want to like go on a nice vacation with my family that I can't currently afford. That could be on that board, and I want to be able to think I can achieve that. to feel good about the future, What's also interesting to me is I've been in multiple homilies with priests where they've like gone after greed. I've even heard a priest say that if you go and ask for a raise, you're just being selfish.
No.
I think the parish staff might ask for a raise right before that homily. That might be the down and dirty. But anyway,
that's bad.
That is bad, right? But that didn't even make sense as a concept, right?
Yeah.
But I don't hear as much preaching on envy, and I think that's where probably the real gold is in this.
I think there's like a marriage book called Fair Play that I don't recommend to anybody. I also haven't read it, but the idea is like, women are unhappy because they carry all of the mental load and they're unhappy, and the doofus husband doesn't, do anything. So how to split up the mental load. And I have seen some marriages where maybe this concept is a little bit like could help, but for the most part, I don't think of my friends' husbands as doofuses. But when anytime I ever hear anybody talk about it, it's like, yes, I was miserable and he had no idea how hard it was. So now also he needs to be miserable with me.
Right. Spread the misery. Misery loves company.
I'm sorry if anyone has benefited from this book. I'm not, but I think it's like the idea that I want to promote as a Catholic married person is that like everybody needs to be trying to give 100%, and that 100% looks really different when the wife is like super pregnant or when someone has an injury or when someone's really tired from work. Like it's just going to look different in the couple, and I think it's like I think that's the fairness is the killer. Fairness is just it's cruel and it's not the right
focus. It's not the right
attitude.
Focus. Yeah, it's not the right. Yeah. It's not something that you should be putting a lot of emotional energy into. Is fairness. And I have to get after my kids on this because all the time we're having these discussions and it comes up, Yeah. And it's like, no, I'm going to try to do what's absolutely best and most loving to you and your sibling, and it may all be different, and it will never be fair. I'm going to try to do what's most loving and best for you. And I think God tries to do that for us. He doesn't try to treat you fairly.
Right.
And you don't want him to treat you fairly.
The thing I say to my kids when they're like, it's not fair, he got a cupcake at the birthday party, I'll be like, you're right. It's not fair. So no one is going to go to any birthday parties anymore because it's not fair. And then they're always like, oh, I didn't mean that,
Just wait for the day when they're like, yes. Because I think that happens too.
Oh,
like if I can't have it, no one.
Oh yeah, let's burn it all down. No, but I'm yeah. But they don't get to go to the next birthday party, or whatever.
I know. Yeah.
Oh, zero-sum games, negative-sum games. Zero-sum games, I wanted to talk about zero-sum games and like God's providence. It's like if you think in terms of zero-sum games, do you think God has limited resources? And are you, God provides a great gift for your neighbor, and do you spit on that gift? Yeah.
It kind of makes you, two other stories about this would be like the laborer who labored all day versus the laborer who labored an hour, but they got paid the same, and the laborer labored all day being mad. It's just not the right attitude, right? Or the son that stayed with the father who's not the prodigal being disappointed in the prodigal coming back. Also not the right attitude, right? That kind of is making this point. I would almost like to, I've never heard it formulated this way, but I'd almost like to theologically have someone help me analyze a statement. Like if that envy is the sin and wishing the good on the other is the virtue, hoping the good for the other.
Yeah.
And that's the virtue I think we
despite
need to
your whether you gain or lose.
Yep.
Yeah.
Despite what happens to you. Right.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go to the next topic. We did a long podcast on religious orders that were kind of like corrupt from the founder. The Legionnaires are an obvious example. The other one is a religious order that has so many names that's kind of strange to say. It's like IVE, Blue Sisters, Incarnate Word, that order.
Yeah.
Which is the order that Laura and I have actually had the most personal interaction with. Laura's had far more than me, but it's the one we've most known about. And then the third one was the Peruvian group that just got in trouble. So Laura said in that podcast, I can't believe that the IVE still has their founder who's been convicted of sexual assault on people in the order on their website.
Yeah, like honoring his founding of the order and a little cute bio and this is what Padre Abuela has done for us. And so
what's happened? What's new?
So a couple people brought an article from The Pillar to my attention that the Vatican has appointed 2 pontifical delegates to the order that will have full powers of governance. I don't know what the official word is, but they did like a study or a inquiry or something. And I think there is an official word. And they just found that like every aspect of the life of the order basically was seriously lacking from, the vocational discernment, formation, their apostolate, their community life. That they're basically every corner of their life had problems.
But they also cited exactly what you said, that they were still burning candles to the founder.
Yes, and I don't remember if I said this as much, but I suspected that they probably thought that he had been persecuted, and that's what the inquiry found as well. Wrongly persecuted, and they were going on there were at least 2 pilgrimages to his tombs, and they were still disseminating his works and using his writing. So
the Pillar article was excellent, and one of the things the Pillar article did is it actually had like figures. It had like, this is the number of priests that have left the order, which was like an enormous number.
It was a huge number. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of those ended up in laizations. Like, it's one thing to leave the order and be happy you're a priest and join a diocese. It's another thing to just leave the priesthood in general. That's an incredible human cost to this problem, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And overwhelmingly, the response to this article, if you just look at the comments, are like, have you even gone far enough? Yeah. Why are you not? So everyone's response.
The Vatican decree that I read, it's from the dicastery of the religious life. There's a longer version title or whatever, but it seems like the decree stated that the problems were, very serious, but that they also found, a great missionary impulse and a lot of personal commitment from a lot of the individuals there. So they are trying to basically fix, everything that's wrong in the order.
I think that there's 3 questions here. Why not the ban? So the argument we developed before, which I still think is totally valid, is that every religious order is a school of holiness. If the school of holiness has no proof that it works at all, it should be shut down. Now, the things I want to analyze are...
I'm sorry, can I say something? I think we didn't say this. The decree, they also put a moratorium on new vocations for 3 years.
Yeah, no one can join the order anymore.
Yeah.
All right. But still, they didn't ban it, So my question is there some issue that they can't ban it, which I think is the most interesting idea?
Like canonical
Well,
issue?
I got a couple issues on that,
Okay.
The second one would be that they're afraid to ban it. And the third issue would be that they actually see an opportunity here, And I still think they need to ban it. But the first one is maybe they can't ban it. So there's 2 ways that this could be true. So one is they have some canonical protection. And if that's the case, we need to change canon law because things like this need to be able to be banned. But I think more likely what it is I think the power of bishops has been underestimated by almost all of us everyday Catholics, right? And I've seen an order banned. It was an order that was completely like in the Diocese of Omaha, and the bishop there disbanded it, you know? I've also seen an order that was completely in one diocese kicked out of the diocese, right? I wonder if Rome actually doesn't have the power to tell a bishop that within his diocese, he cannot allow a religious institute to exist, you know? And therefore, if we want to ban the IVE, it's not Rome who has to do it. It's every single bishop who has them in his diocese has to do it. I'm wondering if that's the problem here, and that's why we don't see Rome ban orders.
The sisters being in DC, like this is terrible. Like in the early days, it was like, thank you to our great friend Cardinal McCarrick, because he understood us and he let us in, you know. So they do have to be let in.
Right. And I do know bishops can ask orders to leave. Mm-hmm. I don't think they can ask pontifical right orders. I think they have more rights. Like if the Jesuits have a college in your diocese, I don't think the bishop at his whim can just kick them out, you know? Yeah. But one of the things that kind of told me that I'm not understanding bishops correctly was recently I went to look into officially recognized Marian apparitions. Okay. And I came to the conclusion after like kind of like messing around with it that I was under the impression that there was like a list by Rome of like officially recognized Marian apparitions, and there's not. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought there were 3 types of Marian apparitions: condemned ones, approved ones, and the middle that they're not sure. That's what I thought. And I
thought that too. And
I thought that would be like in a list form somewhere, you know? What it really is the local bishop promotes an apparition or suppresses it. And if he suppresses it, Rome's not going to contradict him, right? And Rome will never approve it. What Rome does is mention it. That's why they're called recognized, is because like if Rome mentions Our Lady of Guadalupe, then it's recognized by Rome because like they wrote an encyclical and it came up. They mentioned Our Lady of Guadalupe. Right? If they mention your Marian apparition of your diocese, now it's recognized. It got recognized by Rome. You know, it was mentioned, you know, but they never it did say that I did find that there was some evidence that they used to do like these exhaustive like testing of this, right? But they've actually said they're not going to do that anymore, you know? And even then you couldn't like see the test. You couldn't like, I couldn't find any information on like how they like validated these things, you know? So it seems like they were just running those exercises for whether or not they felt like mentioning it and recognizing it, you know, but there just never is this like official list. So anyway, the point there is that the local bishop has a tremendous amount of power with that. Like if the local bishop is against the apparition, you're kind of done, you know, until there's a new local bishop. But I kind of think that could be what's happening with these orders. The other theory I had is that maybe they're not disbanding these orders because they're afraid, and what they're afraid of is that all these assets and all these people who are devoted to the founder of the IVE are going to like join a schismatic group like SSPX, right? And so they think, well, it's better to have them floundering and causing a little bit of damage and messing around as Catholics in union than having them like protest and walk out.
Like a management problem. Basically, like you can manage them more closely. Yeah.
Well, that, and we do believe unity is, you know, better for their souls than schism. Yeah. So that could be it. If that's the case, I think it's poor judgment. I think they should definitely ban these orders because I think the number of guys who become priests and leave and become laicized, like that's just a scar on his family and him, and that's an incredible spiritual wound. And then the other thing is the way the Pillar article read is they almost gave like a performance metric for the IVE. It's like, look, their staffing levels are down and this many people got exclostrated from the cloisters. And you know, it read like a report card, you know, it read like a accounting statement, but instead of it being dollars, it was some spiritual accounting, you know? And it was like, do you just view this as like a business and you're going to send in new management and like turn it around?
Like does the church view it that way?
Right. Like Rome's
Yeah.
like, okay, we got this real failing business. It's the IVE, this real failing order. All we need to do is put in some good management, turn it around, you know? And my position has been from that old podcast is it hurts everyone in this order that it continues to exist. And the way, if you want to turn it around, is what you do is all these sisters in this order say wear blue robes. You'd have them replace their blue robes with gray robes. You'd have them take their constitutions and rule and writings of the founder and burn it in the courtyard. And then for 1 year, they'd live as Benedictines, just in a rule that we know is sound, right? And at the end of the year, they would either come up with a new way forward or not. They could, create a new habit. They could create this, but they're not having to wear the history of it all the time. I think that's if you want to save the actual, structure and the people, I think you have to have that type of rebirth. And then you have a new founding story and a new founding inspiration. Do you have anything to add to this story?
I think they did not really cooperate when they were investigated for their founders' misdeeds, and I hope there is cooperation.
Yeah, that's also the accusation of the Legionnaires is that they never cooperated with the reform. You know? All right.
Yeah.
Let's get to the NNNWO. All right, a lot of things are happening internationally, and so New World Order is a term that was made by prominent leaders right after World War II. And what it meant was between World War I and World War II, we went from a order of monarchs in Europe and stuff to an order of weird democracies and all this other junk where we ended up with sorting out into a Cold War of like a Soviet bloc, the Warsaw Pact, and a Western bloc, the NATO countries. And that was the New World Order. Very different than 40 years before, right? And then in 89, anyone who's that old has lived through a major world order change, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the fall of the Warsaw Pact, America becoming a unipolar superpower. That was a new world order again. So that's the new world order. And it feels like there's enough happening right now that I'm pretty sure we're going to need a new name for this because NNNWO doesn't quite work, right? So here's what has already happened and what's kind of happening just these few weeks that are kind of interesting. So we have China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran cooperating together to have a war in Ukraine where the other side is funded by Europe and America. Okay? That already is enough. Seeing that alliance against us is enough to show something's up, right? The next thing that's happened is Trump called Canada the 51st state, invited Justin Trudeau to visit him in Mar-a-Lago, and a few weeks after Justin Trudeau returns to Canada, he resigns. And there's a lot of reasons why you could say he resigned, but it kind of looks like he resigned because the next administration is going to be very unfavorable to him, and he better get out while the getting's good, right? Trump has also tried to reclaim the Panama. Trump's not even president at the time of this podcast. So this is all happening in just like, statement of fear. It's nothing. He has no real power at this point, but we'll see what happens in the next 100 days. He's claimed that he wants the Panama Canal to be controlled by America, not by Panama. He says he wants to buy Greenland from Denmark. Apparently Leif Erikson discovers Greenland and it's been Danish ever since, and they're trying to depose the British Prime Minister, which we got to get into a little bit, say why they're doing that. And it looks like they're going to go after the German Prime Minister after the British Prime Minister. That's a crazy amount of change in a way that we've never seen. Like whatever was done before was done with soft power. This is much more a overt tactic, on the table tactic, right? So the Greenland issue is that as the globe warms, there's going to be more and more shipping, essentially in the Northwest Passage, the mythical Northwest Passage, right? And there's already an enormous amount of submarine traffic happening in that passage, it appears. And submarines are going to be the new most important weapon. So the military wants Greenland because it's the way to protect America from submarines and from warships and stuff transferring. Similar to the Panama Canal. It's basically going to be the Panama Canal of the North. It's going to be Greenland. The other issue that you could say that's not military is Greenland's got natural gas, it's got uranium deposits, it's got all these natural resources. So that could also be the reason. And it also could be that Trump, in declaring Canada the 51st state, or one thing saying he wants to buy Greenland, is just like a bravado move at the beginning of a negotiation where you're actually going to just like get a concession at the end that's much more small than the initial claim. It's just like a positioning to open up the dialogue. So that's kind of wild.
It seems like the thing that is new is that for decades now it's kind of used to like a diplomacy where it's nice and respectful. Even if it's actually underhanded, it at least looks nice and respectful. So I don't know. I want to trust that our leaders are effective and that they're not screwing people over. So that's what I want. Like, I want to know those things. But
I kind of want to refrain from judging all of this because it's like this all could cause a war and then it's all terrible. Or maybe there's a way it comes out for the good of everyone. I don't know. It's like there's actually some noise out of Denmark that they're open to selling Greenland. One of the things that I was wondering is, you know how things are distorted on maps? Like when you make the globe a flat map, things are distorted.
Yeah.
And Greenland is like enormous.
Uh-huh.
So like how big really is Greenland?
I think it is. Isn't it big?
It is actually enormous. Like there's only like it's bigger than Texas combined with Alaska.
Yeah.
So it's like enormous. Yeah, it's not just a map, hallucination or whatever. So
it's the size of Rhode Island.
But I think what you're trying to say a little bit is like historically the way we did it is, we have a base in Greenland, which apparently we do. But it's because we're friends with Denmark and we all get along. We're all working for the same goals. So we're allowed to have a base in Greenland, And now it's like, no, we don't do things out of friendship. We do things out of like actually having control of something. Like that's what I think is the shift. So in a way that's from below the table to above the table.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that could be terrible or it could be positive. So we'll see.
Right. So the other thing going on is that in England, the UK Prime Minister, England has for 25 years had this enormous scandal called grooming gangs is the normal way it's referred to. And it's about at-risk youth, usually English girls who are in foster care or whatever, being abducted by groups of they're always Islamic and they're almost always Pakistani. There's some African Islamic groups, and basically sexually exploited, horrible things. Like if you want to go see the most horrible things, it's all out there, right? And it's been acknowledged by the English government. Like it's kind of not a secret. Like even the BBC did a documentary, and I've even seen the BBC run commercials trying to teach girls how not to fall prey to these grooming gangs, right? Like don't go talk to the guy who's from the Middle East with the nice car at your playground is the way they like would have these public service announcements, And at this point though, almost no one's been brought to justice for this. The victims are enormous, and anyone who speaks about it, a lot of them have actually gone to prison because England doesn't have freedom of speech. And so there's this energy coming from America led by Elon Musk to like say, you need to step down, Prime Minister of England, Keir Starmer, because you have not protected the English girls. And in fact, you were essentially in American language, the Attorney General when all this happened and you refused to prosecute and you aid and abetted this. It's almost like it'd be like he was a bishop in a Catholic church who kept shuffling around pedophiles and they're not willing to do any investigation, hold anyone accountable or do anything about it. And they're trying to essentially attack the UK government from America because the English don't have the same freedom of speech rights. Literally, there's literally a victim of this grooming gangs who's written a book about it. This is going on for 25 years, who's been, investigated by the police for even speaking up about it, So there's a lot of like weirdness like that, right? Like persecuting the victims, And if this works, it's just so weird. It's just like, it would be like someone very close to the Trump administration or actually in the Trump administration, Elon Musk, has gotten rid of the British Prime Minister. Right. And he then also gave a very long interview to a Deutschland Reform Party, which is kind of considered the far right party of Germany, literally saying, I'm giving this interview so you hear these people's thoughts. to promote major change in Germany. Like that's like the above board statement of Elon Musk on why he's platforming this and doing this, and this is wild. Like, I mean, like it's going to be like, I think we as Americans always saw the Warsaw Pact as like almost like slaves of the Soviet Union. And we saw NATO not as like slaves of the US, but as like our friends, Yeah. But now it's looking like, no, we're just trying to like replace world leaders in our major, like, quote, friend countries because they're not good enough. So I'm just throwing all this out here to not say it's good or bad, but to say things internationally are shifting very fast right now. And if in 2 months there's a new UK prime minister, I would say officially things have really shifted about like the way America's role in the world is. And the books are not yet written and won't be for a while. And my brother-in-law is becoming part of this new world order if he becomes president of Costa Rica.
That was just another little installment in how we see the world changing. So
Laura and we've in this podcast we've covered AI, we've covered all these weird things that happen in the world that are going to change your life, and this is just something that maybe not everyone is paying attention to. That's going to be big, and weird, Having said that, we wish you all very well. We wish you all great success. We wish you to all surpass Laura and I.
Please do. Yes.
All right. Peace be with you.
You too. See you later, Clark.
See ya.